My earliest memories of hearing music was my father's Chopin nocturnes. He'd play most nights after dinner for about half an hour, and I'd lie on my living room floor playing with stuffed animals or toy cars quietly and let his music just wash over me. I was about 9 years old when my parents sent me to sing in an Episcopal choir. They weren't religious, they just thought that being in a choir would help me develop an ear for music. And I loved singing into the harmony of 30 voices, altos, sopranos, bass, tenors, blending together. I would throw my head back and sing to the rafters. I enjoyed my father's singing around the campfires up in Quebec, Canada each summer. He would sing these songs that ranged from earnest to maudlin to just plain old silly, and people would sing along. And I dearly hold on to these memories as well as to the Martin guitar that I inherited from him. And I anticipate playing a lot more in retirement. Most of the songs that I play have lyrics, but today I want to focus on instrumental music because, as many of you know already well, I talk a lot. I use a lot of words and ideas and concepts that dominate my thinking. And if I were to talk about music with lyrics, it would push out what I really want to get to, which is the experience of hearing sound, harmony, melody. I want to explore music as it bypasses conceptual thinking and has an immediate impact. Susan Langer, a philosopher, says that instrumental music can be a symbol, a highly articulated, sensuous object, which can express the forms of vital experience which language is virtually unfit to convey. Feeling, life, motion, emotion constitute its import. Now, as I explore this world beyond words, please excuse the irony that I will be using a lot of words. The other thing is that listening to music is deeply subjective and personal. It's very diverse. So what I say today is not covering everything at all. Today I'm going to explore mainly, excuse me for this, how I experience music as spiritual. And you can take that as you want, wherever you want to go with it. Now, within the humanist context, I use the term spiritual. It does not mean connected to any God concept. I use it because it connects to many elements that are wrapped up in my experience of music. A sense of connection to something greater, deep comfort, healing, transcendence of some sort, and inspiration. So here's my plan. I'm going to talk a little bit about the universality of music, and then I'm going to talk about connections through music. The connections in the outer world between people and the inner connections. How it brings together many parts of ourselves into a unity inside. I'm going to discuss a little bit about how music can heal both the mind and the body. And I'm going to conclude with some inspirational and transcendent impact that it has on me. And more than anything, if this does anything, I hope you go out and listen to more music. We all know that music is very universal. Scientists, in fact, go so far as to say that music began in the origin of the universe. Physicist John Kramer wrote that the explosion that birthed this universe made a sound that is echoing all over the universe and comes up in musical compositions and in the word you hear in yoga sessions, Om. It might be why there have been so many connections in my life between music and physics. My father loved both, with physics barely edging out music for a career choice. The most famous physicist of all time, Albert Einstein, shared this dual love. His second wife, Elsa, in fact, said that he would be working away and then he'd come up and he'd play the piano for a while, scratch some notes and run back down again. The music helped stimulate his musical thinking and got him through roadblocks. Links between science and music can be found all the way back to Greek philosophy. Pythagoras claimed that the sun, the moon, and the planets all emit a unique frequency based on their orbital revolution. Johannes Kepler said that the different rotations of the planets created different electromagnetic vibrations, resulting in cosmic harmonies. Now, he said this musica universalis can't be necessarily heard in the traditional sense, but we can feel it inside. Chad Woodward, who writes on music and technology, said that he thought that the nature of the cosmos is, quote, vibratory. Now, one of my favorite pianists, Keith Jarrett, says he plays music, quote, to an ongoing harmony in the universe that exists with or without us. He says that the sound he produces are sacred vibrations and common cosmic harmony. In the liner notes of a 1973 album, he wrote, "I don't believe I can create, but that I can be a channel for the creative." Woodford suggests that we come into, quote, sympathetic resonance with cosmic vibrations. Though I'll admit I'm a bit skeptical about much of this. On a less cosmic scale, though, some non-human animals make sounds that some people believe are not just forms of communication, but reflect some aesthetic intent. While bird songs often warn of predators, they are communication, they also repeat complex, distinctive structures that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Compositions of humpback whales, can go on for half an hour and travel miles. And they learn from each other, these songs. Some even have certain repertoires that they offer. And even the rhythmic bursts of insects can have a musical quality. But again, I'm slightly skeptical of such claims. So I'm going to focus on the human spiritual attachment to music that is very universal. I mean, you can find it in Christian hymns and Jewish cantors, Buddhist chants, the Vedic practice of call and response, songscapes of Australian Aboriginals, as well as Native American peoples. Now, it may be due to evolution, as much is due to evolution, because survival might be enhanced because of music, because it connects us to each other. So let's explore that a bit. In his much heralded book, This Is Your Brain on Music, The Science of a Human Obsession, by Daniel Levitin, he makes the case for the evolutionary efficacy of music. He opposes Steven Pinker's claim that music is nothing more than auditory cheesecake. Maybe tasty, but not really useful. Levitin counters, saying that the study of neuroanatomy and emotion, along with the work of some evolutionary scientists like Geoffrey Miller and Charles Darwin, convinced him of the cognitive, emotional, and physical benefits of music. It is evolutionarily advantageous, he believed, because it can increase social bonding and cooperative habits. And that might be why we so often make music with each other. We gather to listen to music, we move our bodies together to music, folk dancing, bobbing to dubstep, or Sufi whirling, right? Now, unfortunately, of course, music can also encourage aggression, girding folks for combat on battlefields. It's one reason why drummers and fifers and buglers and bagpipers marched with soldiers into war. Music can stir up tribal aggressions we see in our society. Hitler solidified his sort of sense of chauvinistic spirit by broadcasting many featured radio broadcasts of Wagner and Anton Bruckner. Now, personally, I feel lots of connections with composers and performers. A scientist by the name of Michael Graziano says that our social nature leads us to seek intentionality. When we encounter human creations, we are curious as to what happened to lead to that creation. What were they imagining? When they look at a painting, they say, what was that painter thinking or attempting to portray? And I think it's particularly true regarding music. Graziano says that the region of the brain that infers mental states in others is very near the auditory cortex and is probably connected to it. When he listens to Mozart, he says, for example, he senses a deep logic. He writes, I sense a presence. My brain generates a mind state, a persona, and attributes it to the music. Not the mind of Mozart, the man, but a kind of soul that invests that particular piece. The piece has a persona, a palpable spirit, and I feel as though I can have a personal relationship to that spirit. End quote. I have a good friend by the name of Kate Dillingham. She's a renowned cellist, and she connects deeply with composers and musicians. She describes listening to music as a spiritual experience. That's the word she uses. She says, you are giving yourself up to a musician or composer and letting them take you somewhere. You're breathing them in, so to speak. That's a very intimate experience. One that Daniel Levitin says we, quote, surrender to. He writes, we allow ourselves to trust the composers and musicians with a part of our hearts and our spirits. We let the music take us somewhere outside of ourselves. People put a lot of trust in composers and performers because we let them guide us. Now, solo concerts of the jazz pianist Keith Jarrett have often been described as involving that sacred trust between him and the audience. Though he could be very idiosyncratic and demanding of his venues and his audience, he had a sense of reverence in his concerts. Joanna Petch, who writes about Jarrett's spiritual beliefs, described the concert atmosphere as being like, quote, a sacred ritual, or even a religious ceremony. The silent, well-mannered audience sits in expectation, facing the stage or altar as they anticipate revelation. I feel that kind of revelation when I listen to Keith Jarrett's 1975 Cologne concert, which is the top-selling solo piano album of any genre. It draws me in so much that at times I bend forward in reverence. I can't help it. Kate Dillingham speaks of surrendering to music as a uniquely human relationship of trust and intimacy. And such surrender, she says, is hard for her if the music seems mechanical. She says that connecting with music must for her involve a human element. The music has to breathe. When she composes, she tries to share with listeners her personal relationship to the sound. It reminds me a bit of one of my favorite British folk singers, Billy Bragg, who, when talking about music, called empathy the currency of music. And that currency has social implications. You exchange currency. Graziano suggests that, for example, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony was greatly popular, he suggests, because of its radical embrace of human solidarity. It had a revolutionary impact, which is why some authoritarian governments actually banned it. Judy Neal, a spirituality consultant for businesses, noted that during the Taliban rule, between about 1996 and 2001, music was banned. Authoritarians will often sacrifice music in exchange for submission. Neal says, if you want to break the spirit of a people, take away their music. She spoke of a friend in Portugal who lived through the Salazar dictatorship, where they banned and controlled music. And she said she would sneak into her parents' meetings of resistance groups where they would sing folk songs, and she was told not to sing them in public because it could get their parents killed. Because music has power and it connects people. These connections bonded people working for a cause. And it can help people survive and flourish. let's turn to connections within ourselves. Philosophers have long noted how music can connect the many parts of us. Plato, who sought to nurture inner unity and balance, praised music. He said, more than anything else, rhythm and harmony find a way into the inmost soul and take a hold of it. My friend Kate said something very similar in her cello music. She says that concerts that she goes to connects her to her center, to the, quote, deepest part of myself, down to my DNA. Judy Neal says that music is her spiritual practice and serves as a, quote, shortcut to the soul. When she plays the electric bass guitar, actually, she says that it balances her because she has a high soprano voice. And so she says the unity she gets is balancing the masculine and the feminine within her. She says it feels intricative in so many ways. Pianist and composer W.R. Mathieu speaks of the resonance and how, quote, it bridges the phenomenal world and the world within. A few decades ago, I explored music by reading Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. You may know this as revolutionary in many ways, because unlike what people assumed about IQ, Gardner said that intelligence has different modalities that cannot be measured on a single scale. You cannot come up with one number that represents intelligence. He cited 8 different intelligences as the beginning. He has more now, but the original 8 were linguistic, logical naturalistic, spatial, bodily kinesthetic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, naturalistic, and musical. Well, I took this assessment test of his, and my musical intelligence was way higher than all the others, which is a little weird because I don't really know music theory. And when I went back and I looked at the test, I realized, no, it wasn't about conceptual understanding. It was about how important music was to connect me with the world and experience wholeness in the world. It's a huge part of my life. I mean, I listen to it constantly. I crave it when I don't get it. I go for it for comfort. In movies, it's what makes me cry quickest. But maybe even Gardner's model is a little oversimplified because we can't really pour all of our musical sort of knowledge into one category of intelligence. Kip and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, and I think he's correct in saying that music flows into multiple modes of interpretation. It can involve many parts of us, like psychological, bodily, empirical, religious, spiritual, and interpersonal modes of interpretation in the world. Well, in 2020, Gardner actually admitted that when he said that music can involve a whole melody and melding of intelligences. He says it can move our body, our posture, our breath, our digital dexterity, and our feelings deeply. He writes that, quote, attuning the energy that flows through our body includes our emotions, which can be coaxed into moving through the music. Music can also involve interpersonal intelligence between performer and audience. It can involve types of knowledge that are mathematical, and all the types of knowledge, really. Weaving these different intelligences together is a big part of musical experiences. Levitin writes, quote, when we play an instrument, including singing, we are engaging more mental faculties than almost any other activity. Motor systems, motor planning, imagining, sensory auditory processing, and if we're inspired, creativity, spirituality, pro-social feelings, and possibly a state of heightened awareness coupled with calm, known as the flow state. That sense of flow can offer a lot of comfort and healing, which I want to talk about now. Obviously, music can affect our moods. Certain rhythms can increase our blood flow to parts of our brain. They can change our brain waves, release dopamine into our bloodstream. These physiological changes can enhance the experience of healing. Listening to your favorite music can help release sadness and grow positivity. And that was very obvious during the height of COVID, how many people turned to music for comfort. Judy Neal, for example, talked about listening to Anton Dvorak's Going Home when navigating the dark moods during the pandemic. In fact, she said that Yo-Yo Ma's version led her to burst into tears because, as she wrote, in the midst of isolation and fear, Yo-Yo Ma showed that he cared and that he could offer something beautiful in time of darkness. Last fall, I was battling some dark feelings myself, and I listened to Kate Dillingham's new album called Ever Now. And for me, what was interesting, it was not a distraction from the dark feelings. It actually helped me pay attention to them. I mean, obviously, it's best sometimes not to dwell on negativity, but other times feelings need our attention. Sometimes we need to focus on the darkness. Sometimes the darkness can be our friend. Thich Nhat Hanh described once that dark moods may not leave us alone until we give them some loving kindness, and music can encourage that. So I lay down, I put on some headphones, I closed my eyes, and I let Kate's atmospheric music wash over me. And I listened with my heart. That's easy to do, as Woodford explains, because the ear is connected to the heart in no way any other organ is. So I welcomed my sad feelings in and I mixed them in the music. And a gentle healing and a peacefulness started to grow. Not immediately, but over days. I began to accept the wound and help healing begin. Later, Kate told me actually that when she wrote her music for Ever Now, it grew out of her transcendental meditation practice. Now, TM was very popular when I was young, and it taps into ancient Vedic meditation techniques. For her, it was deeply wrapped up in spirituality. There's a long history of music being a healing agent. Confucius taught, quote, music produces a kind of pleasure which human nature cannot be without. But I think it's more than a pleasure. It's like medicine. I mean, music has been used to heal in diverse times and places, from ancient Greece to Egypt to India. One of the founders of Western medicine, Hippocrates, treated mentally troubled folks that he called frenetic by bringing them to temples and listening to healing symphonia, he wrote. According to Woodford, when we listen to harmonious music, we are attuning our entire being to something beyond itself. Our minds, our hearts, our bodies, our souls. He calls this energetic chiropractic adjustment, in the sense that he's restoring an order and wholeness to a system out of alignment. Music is used to restore and focus joy from those who are suffering from dementia. There's a 2014 documentary called Alive Inside, where a catatonic 92-year-old suddenly woke up in joy after hearing his music from his youth. And I think most of you know that through retirement homes all through the country and around the world, they use music as a way to uplift moods. Music can also help us sleep. Many of you might. I have a very good friend, my longest musical friend, Kevin Clark, who lives in Australia, uses instrumental music to help him fall asleep. He recommends an album called Sleep by Max Richter. And Kevin told me that when Richter offered this 8-hour, 24-minute composition at the Sydney Opera House, the audience was provided with beds. Kevin also finds pain relief in music. Binaural beats is an atmospheric music composition you listen to on headphones. You have to listen to it on headphones for it to occur. It can improve relaxation. Many people undergoing dental work or trapped in the CAT scan machine use music to reduce nervousness and pain. Writing and composing music can be spiritual. It was for Kevin. When his son had a cardiac arrest at a young age, he wrote a song called The Fall and a song called Resurrection. And in doing that, it helped him overcome the fear and the pain and the trauma of that time. Thank goodness his son survived. But one artist that Kevin and I both loved and talked about growing up was Eric Clapton. Was not so lucky. As you know, his son died from a fall from a window. and he wrote that poignant song, Tears in Heaven. And he said for Clapton, it was a healing experience. He said that music took me away from that trauma. And many of Clapton fans found that song healing. He got, after its release, 150 letters a day thanking him for writing that song from people who knew similar grief. Cloud Cult is a band that I listen to, and they were on Krista Tippett's On Being, talking about music as healing. Their frontman, Craig Minowa's 2-year-old son, died unexpectedly a couple of decades ago, and he channeled his grief through composing and performing, and his concerts began to attract people looking for that same healing. Minowa said that what was his personal medicine became a balm for thousands of people. Even those suffering from intense PTSD can use music to help heal. Levitin, in the book Music is Medicine, makes the case for this restorative support for people suffering from intense grief and trauma and mental health challenges, physical pain. It's not a cure-all, but it can be an important part of an overall therapeutic program. But for most everyone, we know that music can uplift us, it can encourage loving thoughts. In producing music, the pianist Matteo that I talked about earlier writes, "It's the quality of your love that matters in making music." You have to learn to listen with your ears, but also with the heart. Matteo encourages, quote, bringing attention to the heart center as we listen, cultivating an imagined softness there. By listening with the heart, we are learning to live more from the heart. I've certainly felt that way. So if you'd like, during this next musical interlude, think of that. Maybe even place your hand on your chest if you wish. I invite you to do whatever you want. But I want to thank people like Kevin and Kate Dillingham and Keith Jarrett and Kip for offering that healing. So I want to talk this last section about inspiration and transcendence. These two terms are connected to traditional religion for sure. When I asked Kate Dillingham about what music, outside of explicitly religious music, was most spiritual for her, she answered right away, John Coltrane's Love Supreme. Now, many of Coltrane's songs have religious themes. They're titled things like Psalm, or Om, Ascension, Meditation, Selflessness. These songs came to him primarily after he recovered from addiction, although he went in and out. He joined what was known as the spiritual jazz movement. He wrote, "My music is the spiritual expression of what I am, my faith, my knowledge, my being." Now, I find a lot of connection with spirituality in jazz recordings. Chick Corea's Return to Forever, Pat Metheny's song, It's For You, and most of all, that Cone concert by Jared. Listening to them, especially when I am listening actively, anticipating the movements, letting the sound enter deep into my consciousness, that's when it becomes deeply spiritual. I recently read an article called Why is Music a Religious Experience by neuroscientist Michael Graziano, and he explores the religious type awe, is what he calls it, that can arise listening to music. It's part of its personal and cultural power. It intensifies the emotions, it can bond communities. Compared to true believers who tie the awe and reverence they experience through music to God, Graziano ties the experience to the composer or the performer, like I was saying before. Listening to music can help us ponder the intentionality of the music, and it can open up a whole new world to us. Graziano writes, "My brain is treating the music like a universe of complexity and investing that universe with its own deity, for whom I feel some measure of awe and reverence. My relationship to the music is, in the most fundamental sense, the same as a religious relationship to the real world." That's saying something. Music can connect us, in Woodward's phrasing, to a world, quote, beyond our mundane reality, to something thoroughly beyond. And at those moments, he says, our ego can recede in the presence of a non-rational, mysterious beyond. That was very central to an article by Jeremy Rundell in a British Journal of Humanist UK. He describes the inner experiential spirituality of music as being not about being, is a feeling, not thinking, involving a sense of transcendence or connectedness with something larger, being associated with emotions of elation and joy and compassion, and being specific to the individual, end quote. He admits that some humanists like you may not want to use the term spiritual to describe it, and that's fine, he thinks, and I do. But the intensity of our non-intellectual experience of music draws me to use the term spiritual to convey that sense of transcendence and inspiration. Rodell emphasizes one other characteristic of music as a spiritual experience that I talked about earlier. He emphasizes that deeply subjective and personal nature of it. There's no disputing taste, and I think that's really true about music. Many revelations through music are experienced internally. I can't hand to you what I experience when I hear Keith Jarrett's Cone concert, even just the first 5 notes. You might hear those notes. You don't hear the days and years that I've heard that. You don't feel the same feelings. When we do connect, it's so worthwhile. Those first 5 notes. Bends me over, like in prayer. My experience of music is deeply personal, and when I take music in, it feels like I am inhaling it, drawing sustenance inside me. Kate Dillingham described it similarly. She said, when listening to a composition or music, she says, you are breathing them in, so to speak. Inspiration is about breathing, after all. Now, in conclusion, I just want to add something very obvious. Inspiration can also be very shared. We can all breathe the same air. And when I get together to make music socially or within my humanist community context, it can be deeply spiritually rewarding. Some of my closest friendships are wrapped around music. The connection it creates seems timeless. It reminds me of being that choir boy and taking that deep breath and letting it fly and just feeling like I was in air. So thank you for listening. Now listen to this. April 19th, be here for a new composition. And I want to just add this. Kip and I was talking about this, and he suggested improvisation is something he loves. He didn't read my talk before today, and this music just came for him as he was sitting there. So give him another round of applause.